Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO Terasic's series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. In this video, more specifically, the Irem M90 core, because Wickerwaka last year did Irem M92 and buttoned that up, and it's such an incredible experience. He's gone back in to cover some more Irem hardware, and we now have the M90, which definitely doesn't have anywhere near as big of a library as the M92 does, but it's got one of my favorite franchises of all time, so you know we're going to have a fun time with it, and that is going to be Bomberman. Or get far involved, it'd be a huge favor. Go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we have a Patreon link down below as well. But just so you know, the Irem only plays two games as far as the M90 is concerned: Bomberman and a Mahjong game. But there's a ton of different variants of the Bomberman release. They kind of almost feel like their own individual games in some ways, but they are pretty much derivative of themselves. And if you've never seen the channel or never heard me talk about Bomberman, you know it's one of my favorite franchises of all time. So we're going to have an absolutely massive fun time playing this game. And Wickerwaka has just been going down the line as far as Irem arcade hardware is concerned, picking them off, M92 being the most popular and most famous of their boards, but M90 being no slouch either. And obviously, if you played a Bomberman game before, you're going to know 100% what is going to be on offer here. Well, this is the only game that I believe has Pupa from the Solar Opposites on Hulu. If that's not him, I don't know who it is. And Bomberman's just been one of those classic retro gaming franchises that's been around for absolutely forever. So many different games, both the traditional style as well as 3D platformers on Nintendo 64. It is just one of those games, you pick it up, you play it, and you have an absolute blast. And because this is an arcade game, you get both the single player campaign mode as well as the multiplayer mode with up to 4 players at once. Now do be aware, this is not yet an update all. This is a manual installation from the Irem channel over on the MiSTer FPGA Discord, because it still is in testing, but honestly, in my gameplay with Bomberman here, absolutely nothing went wrong whatsoever. All of the graphics drew correctly, all of the music sounded exactly like I remember, all of the controls are 100% dialed in. There was a hotfix this morning for some flickering on the RetroTink 4K, but otherwise, pretty much this seems like a fully completed core that is just undergoing testing. And that is awesome, because there's so many amazing arcade boards we can have on MiSTer FPGA. For every Capcom CPS and CPS2, there's something like the Irem M90, which has one of my favorite Bomberman arcade games ever made on it. If you've never played Neo Bomberman on the Neo Geo AS or MVS, that is another awesome arcade release, because Bomberman just wasn't a home console game. You got a ton of arcade releases with him as well, some definitely better than others, and this I would put up in the top 3 as far as the franchise is concerned. So this is just a fun time to get another arcade core, and it is slightly less powerful obviously than the Irem M92, and Irem took the Konami route of engineering hardware. They'd produce a new board variant, they'd put 1 or 2 games on it, and then they would basically abandon it to go on to something different. And that is kind of fun to see all of these different boards coming over to MiSTer, and there is still Irem fun to be had, and maybe Wickerwaka will grace us with some more cores in the future. But just take a look at everything on screen, the visuals, all of the heads-up display, the motion, the animation. I can't see a single frame out of place, and I can't see this game doing anything other than what you'd expect original arcade hardware to do. That is obviously always the goal of something like a MiSTer FPGA core. You want it to be indistinguishable from the hardware that would actually be sitting in front of you hooked up to that JAMA edge. And that's exactly what Wickerwaka has been doing with all of the Irem games. And if for some strange reason you haven't played any of the Irem M92 core games yet, I can't recommend them enough. It's some of the best arcade gaming fun you can have. But Bomberman on M90 definitely satisfies that as well. But as far as the game is concerned, it is arcade difficult. Bomberman games have never been the easiest things in the world. A lot of the enemies have some very interesting patterns that you basically have to learn and exploit to be able to move further in, but because it is an arcade game, of course that difficulty is going to be dialed up a little bit more, because it was designed to basically take your quarters from you. That's always a fun time, and I love that when you blow the chickens up here, they turn into a roast chicken that you can collect 4 points. And because this is a Bomberman game, it is by law that it has to have one of the best soundtracks of all time. Bomberman music is always incredible, and Bomberman World on the Irem M90 board is no different, so go ahead and listen for 45 seconds or so. Not only is the music and sound effects in this game awesome, it's also sounding great coming out of the core. If the audio was doing anything different than a real arcade board, I would have absolutely no idea how to tell, because I absolutely love Bomberman music and it sounds great coming out here. And if you were curious, this is running on the NEC V30 CPU, and a lower voltage variant of that was brought over to the Bandai WonderSwan, so NEC had a good foothold in gaming, and pretty much all of the Irem boards use some variant of that V series CPU. And just like any other arcade board, there's a ton of options. They're all going to be dip switch settings. You're not really going to be going into a test menu, so you'll just pop into the MiSTer FPGA menu and articulate whatever options you want here, like demo sounds being on. By default they are off, and all of the core settings will basically adhere to the default state of a PCB, the way you would have found it out of the box. And I always appreciate when people do that. They leave the options the same as the manufacturer. But as I get a little bit further into Bomberman World here, I can't stress enough just how good of a multiplayer party game this is, and how easy it is to set up 4 controllers on MiSTer FPGA via USB or any other way you want to input them, compared to an original arcade board where getting 4 players in is going to be quite the wiring job indeed. As you get a little bit further into some of the boss fights, this game can just be downright difficult in all the fun ways and best ways possible. It's never going to be cheap. If you die, it's because you didn't read the enemy's movement, and just like pretty much every other Bomberman game, the boss battles are going to be epic and very challenging. The one thing this game does, which I do not like, and I wish it didn't do it, but it makes sense for an arcade game, is that all of the power-ups you get in one level will not transport with you to the next level. You have to pick them up every single time. So you're going to go into every level as the base powered Bomberman, and you're going to have to find upgrades from there. The good thing is there's a ton of upgrades in every single level, so it really doesn't leave you hanging. And on that level, if you do take a continue, you still get to keep those power-ups, versus most Bomberman games are going to put you back to your stock settings. And you'll see here we took out this first boss, and it was a ton of fun. There's even some bonus stages in this game where you can kind of find some more points and power-ups, but definitely put this one on the next time you have a game night, because I'm assuming it's a Bomberman game that most people haven't really played. I don't ever remember seeing this in arcades back in the day. I have seen it in more recent years, but it's one of those deeper cut Bomberman games, because for every Saturn Bomberman, Bomberman 94, or Super Bomberman, there is something like Bomberman World on the Irem M90, that deep cut Bomberman experience that you didn't know you were missing from your life but is now here. And again, on the performance front, look at that sprite of the sun with all of those different fireballs spinning around him. That's the type of area where you might think you could see a bug or so if everything wasn't running perfectly in that FPGA code. But I paid attention and I see absolutely nothing. But one more sound sample, because I do love the music and it sounds great in the core. 45 seconds and I'll be right back. The soundtrack is just so fun, and it sounds so good coming out of the core. And just if you're wondering, apparently that Mahjong game isn't currently working, so if you are a massive Mahjong game fan, I guess you're going to have to play any other number of Mahjong games on MiSTer FPGA. But between Super Nintendo, PlayStation 1, and pretty much every other console, you pretty much have Mahjong covered for yourself 100%. It's never a game I've learned, but maybe I should one day. Tell me down below if you ever played Mahjong and is it worth learning? I would be curious. But the one game I've played a metric crap ton of in my life and still have fun every single time I do it is a Bomberman game. Sure, there's definitely some bad Bomberman games out there, Act Zero on the Xbox 360 being the #1 leader as far as bad is concerned, but something like Bomberman World or the other Bomberman games on the M90 are just absolutely metric tons of fun. This is classic arcade gaming goodness here, and again, if you bring some friends, you get a 4-player game going and you pop over into battle mode, it is some of the most intense and ridiculous arcade fun you can have on MiSTer FPGA in my opinion. And I love Wickerwaka's dedication to Irem as a manufacturer is concerned, because for every In the Hunt, a game that everybody knows, there is something like Bomberman World, which is definitely a deeper cut. But just remember, this is manual install only. I'm sure it'll go to update all soon, but we are done. Go download the core, play some Bomberman, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.